This is Tansy Ragwort. It is a problem with farmers in Lewis County, and it's widespread in Washington. It came here in about the 1912. In California was the first state that it showed up in, and then it became widespread in the West after that. We've had a really bad problem with it in 2020, and that's because it really likes wet, cool springs, which we have definitely had. And it does have some natural pests that have been imported, like the tansy cinnabar moth, and there's also a tansy flea beetle. Unfortunately, cool, wet springs don't translate well to the pests surviving very well. So what happens usually is the tansy will become to a high level, and then the pests catch up, they eat it back, and then it suppresses it some until then the pests die off, and then you start to get tansy again. So they'll probably never totally eliminate it. I haven't seen very many cinnabar moths this year, and there's also a flea beetle. The flea beetle you may not see. It is actually the best control of it. It's a little beetle. It'll eat around the roots, and then you see the little holes in the leaves. This one's actually a really healthy plant, so I don't think it's getting attacked by flea beetles at the moment. The tansy is generally a biennial, which means it grows 1 year and then it'll flower and set seed the second year. So tansy can have 100,000 to 200,000 seeds. So each plant that you leave is going to have a lot more babies if you don't take care of it. Some of the things you can do to control tansy is pulling it. One problem with pulling it is it can leave the roots. So you're actually better off to dig it. But what happens when you dig it is you leave a spot of bare soil that can be colonized by other weeds. So the best thing to do after you dig it or pull it is to maybe throw a little grass seed. Make sure you keep that really a vigorous patch of grass growing. You'll have less weed problems and less of the seed can germinate. So one thing about spraying for tansy, if it's widespread, that may be the only practical way to really kill it, is that it does make it more palatable to animals. The main animals we worry about are horses and cattle. And usually cattle won't eat it unless they're starving. The same with horses, if it's the only thing left in the pasture. But the thing about spraying is it increases the sugars in the plant, so they really like it. And mowing, a lot of people mow tansy, but the problem with that is you get little dried bits in the pasture, and then the animals, especially cows, might eat it. Horses are a little more picky, but it's a little harder for them to pick around it. And if you do mow the plants, that makes them more likely to persist as a perennial, because after they flower, then they die. But if they don't get to flower and you're continually mowing it, it's continually growing back every year trying to get flowered, and then you end up with a bigger, healthier plant. The animals that it's really toxic to are cattle, horses, and another thing that people probably haven't considered is there's a lot of pasture pigs nowadays. They actually are really susceptible to being poisoned by tansy, especially because they root around a lot. And chickens also can be poisoned by tansy, but I really couldn't find any documentation where they actually had been. Usually for cattle and horses to get poisoned by it, it has to be 5% of their diet for 20 days, and then you expect them to die within 6 months. That's from the USDA. So what happens is they may seem fine for a really long time, but then they'll have vision problems, neurological problems, they get fluid-filled abdomen, and people really don't know why they were sick, because they could have gotten poisoned in the summer and then die in the winter. But one problem too is in hay, especially horses might kind of pick it out, but cows just kind of eat everything in hay. So that's definitely a problem for being poisoned in hay. The thing that makes tansy so poisonous to animals is it has alkaloids in it, which attack the liver. They especially are poisonous to cattle and horses, like I said before, and people too. So if you are pulling this, make sure you wear gloves so you don't get it in your skin. I mean, you'd have to get a lot, but I mean, it's your liver. You want to take good care of it. And apparently the Greeks and Romans thought it was an aphrodisiac and used to take it. I don't know, maybe that's why they died early. And one thing too is when you do pull it, don't compost it, because the seeds can survive the compost, and then when you use that compost, you'll be spreading it everywhere. the best thing to do is bag it up and take it to the dump, or if you're allowed to in your area, you can burn it. Just make sure that you don't spread the seeds when you're taking it to the burn pile. So if you don't have a chance to go around and pull it, it would be a good idea just to clip off the seeds even. That'll help a lot, just because every plant that goes to seed, you're going to have that 100,000 to 200,000 new possible plants. What you can do is, there's a lot of research with grazing sheep, and apparently sheep can eat the tansy without being affected. They've done autopsies on the livers and they haven't had a problem with it. I would definitely do your own research before you decide that that's a good idea. But at least if they eat the flowers off and continually eat it back, you're not getting all the new plants, and they can help control it, especially if they're in a rotation with cattle. There's some evidence maybe goats can eat it without being affected, but there hasn't been as much study on goats. Okay, so for controlling tansy, you might want to consider implementing a fall spray program, because you have these young plants that just are formed rosettes. They actually take a lot of the poison down into the roots in the fall, and then you can get a much better kill. You don't have to worry about it in the spring. And then also the fall is a really good time to overseed, so you won't have those bare spots as much. One thing too that you can look at is there's the Pacific Northwest Weed Handbook. It's online. It actually gives you lots of tips of actually what herbicides you can use to kill the weeds. And then it doesn't just have tansy, it has all kinds of different weeds. So you just type your weed in there and it'll give you an idea of what you can use to kill it and how to kill it, what time to kill it. It has been sprayed. Actually, it's too late to spray it, because as you can see, it didn't get a real good kill. It's already flowering. So this plant will still go to seed. It probably would be better just to dig it up and get rid of it, because you really didn't do anything other than you feel good because it looks like it's dying.